In this second video of the Venn diagram explanation, I'm going to show you how to start with a standard form categorical syllogism and use a Venn diagram and mood and figure to determine its validity. I've already translated it for you, and in fact, we're on page 270 in your textbook looking at the first example given. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to draw your three circles. The middle term goes here, the minor term goes here, and the major term goes here. They've made everything very basic and easy for you. They've used P as the major term. Let's go ahead and identify those. And S as the minor term, and M as the middle term. It's already in appropriate standard form with the major premise listed first, the minor premise listed second, and the conclusion last. So what you're going to do when you're filling in a Venn diagram is, again, ignore the conclusion. No marks will be made for the conclusion. We're only going to be making marks for the premise no P are M and the premise all S are M. So let's look first at no P or M. If I were to do a sort of a thing like you would use an insert in a map, right? Or this is just part of the diagram over here before we put it into the larger diagram. If I were just to look at no P or M, I would want to look only at the P circle and at the M circle. So let me draw a smaller diagram here of just the P circle and the M circle. I want to say that no members of P are also members of M. This is a universal premise, so I know I'm going to be using shading instead of X's. So what I want to do is shade out any part where M and P connect, because I want to show that no P are M. So what I am effectively doing when I'm shading is shading out the unimportant areas. I'm showing that P where it's blank and M where it's blank are not connected to one another. There are no P's that are also in the M circle. If I wanted to look at all S are M, I would do the same thing with the M circle and the S circle. I'm going to shade out what's not important. So if I wanted to say that all S are members of M, I want to leave this part blank because that's the important part when we shade. So I want to shade out all the portions of S that don't overlap with M to show that all members of S that I'm worried about or that matter are also members of M, so that everything that's blank is what's important. Now, all S or M is also a universal premise, so that's why I used shading, and I'll show you now how to put it into the larger diagram. If we look at no P or M and put it into the larger diagram, and we can do that because these are both universal premises and I don't need to worry about putting in one before the other. I just need to remember to shade before I put X's in. So put universals in before particulars. So what I'm going to do is I'm only going to deal with no P or M with the M circle and the P circle. So if I think about them being highlighted, I'm only looking at this circle and this circle. I'm ignoring that third S circle. So when I shade out the area between M and P, I'm going to do exactly as my rules told me, and I'm going to shade out the entire area, ignoring this line that bisected this middle part that I'm shading in. When I'm shading, I'm just going to shade right over it. Now, I'm not looking for all S or M at the M and the P circle. I'm now looking at the S circle and the M circle. So it's almost as if you have to think of them popping out from the page as you're looking at two of them at one time. So now I want to fill it in exactly this way, that S part that's larger is what needs to be shaded out, and I'm going to ignore this line that divides this into two or bisects it. So when shading, I'm going to shade just directly over it. So you can see, and your book gives you these exact steps as well. You can see that now I've had everything into my diagram. Both of my premises have both been entered into the larger diagram. Once you get very good at this, it won't even be necessary for you to draw these on the side, although you may want to get into the habit of doing that. It's probably good practice to do. But this is the finished Venn diagram. Now, what you're meant to be able to do with this is to determine whether the conclusion is present when the premises are put into the diagram. So I'm going to look at this diagram and say, is the conclusion accounted for in the finished diagram? The conclusion is no S or P. So let me draw it out for you here just so that you can see what I'm talking about. No S or P is the conclusion. So if I were looking at the conclusion, I'd only be looking at the S circle and the P circle. Same as here, I want to shade out anywhere that S meets up with P to show that there are no S's that are also P's that are important. I want to separate S and P by shading out the area between them. So is this in this diagram? Well, it surely is. Look, this area, this entire area that the conclusion represents has been shaded when you put the two premises together in the diagram. Therefore, I suspect that this argument is valid. But the way that I can check that is to quickly figure out mood and figure. So you'll remember from the last video, I'm going to go from top to bottom, E, A, E. I've already checked to make sure that it's in appropriate standard form. And my middle term is going to tell me what figure this is. And because the middle term is all the way to the right, I know that it's going to be EAE 2. So I can check my answer. I think that it's valid, but I can go back and check. I'll show you my handwritten version of this. I can go back and check the unconditionally valid forms and conditionally valid forms chart and see, is EAE under figure 2? In fact, it is there. So now I've been able to double check my work to say, is it unconditionally valid? Yes. Why? Because not only did I read the diagram and the diagram showed the conclusion, but also I can double check it with my mood and figure. On an examination, you might be asked to translate an argument, which I didn't show you in this example, put it into standard form, determine mood and figure, and then draw a Venn diagram and determine whether it's unconditionally valid, conditionally valid, or invalid from both perspectives.